Long ago, in the year 2000, 6 mighty warriors defended
Lego
from the evil and powerful.
declining profitability.
These 6 warriors controlled the 6 elements in their fight against the forces of
Not making money. My name's Jake, you can call me J-Town if you like, and today I'm going to be giving you the full rundown of Bionicle, deep dive. I was a massive fan of Bionicle as a kid, and I've got loads of fond memories of how it used to really kind of awaken my imagination. And every so often, right, I find myself thinking, often in the shower, because that's where all good thoughts happen, what happened to it? What happened to Bionicle? Where did it go? Whether you're a fan of Bionicle or not, there's no denying that it was a toy that changed the course of Lego forever. And, as I'm gonna go on to argue, it actually gave Lego the framework that the company needed to go from being in pretty dire financial straits in 1999 to then being named the world's most influential brand in 2017. Now, the way that I'm gonna break this down is as follows. We're gonna start with what is Bionicle? I'll give you a brief overview of the toys, the culture, the context, and set you up for the rest of the video. If you're already a big Bionicle fan, then you can just kind of consider that a trip down memory lane. And then, once we're fully acquainted, I will move into why was Bionicle so successful? Why Bionicle was such a powerhouse franchise, what they did right. Then we'll get into the age-old question, the whole point of the video, right? Where did Bionicle go? We'll talk about what Bionicle did wrong, why the franchise failed, and the effects that the franchise is still having on the toy industry today. Now, before I kick off the video, I've got a couple of disclaimers for you. I am at the very start of my YouTube journey, and this is my first kind of long form video, but if you enjoyed spending time with me as much as I enjoy spending time with you, then I've got great news for you. It's going to be the first of many. So it would be really great if you could consider subscribing to the channel and maybe sharing this video with anyone else you know who's a fan of this kind of long form deep dive, or just who had Bionicles when they were a kid, right? Like, I'm kind of a fan of both. I loved Bionicles when I was a kid. I like long form deep dives into topics I'm curious about. So I really hope that I do this justice. And I'd love to know what you think in the comments. Now, there is a very dedicated Bionicle fan base online, and the lore goes deep, 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 deep. Now, I'm not a part of the Bionicle fandom, if you'd call it that, fan base maybe. This video is just kind of a passion project that's been born out of a really thick layer of, you know, nostalgia and curiosity, and also just love, right? Blech. My point is, if I get anything wrong here about the lore or the product timelines or anything like that, then please do feel free to correct me in the comments below. And what I'll do is I'll compile those corrections into a pinned comment. So it's immediately available there for everyone to see. But you know, hopefully there won't be any, and everything will be perfect. Wouldn't that be great? So, let's begin. Let's get working on that question that comes to me at least once a month, and that I think about for a little bit, and then think about again later and read Wikipedia articles about. Where did the Bionicles go? Bionicle was a line of constructible action figures that arrived disassembled and then were built by the player. They were released under Lego's Lego's cool subsidiary brand, Technic, which was like, you know, the Fox Kids of Lego, the Toonami of Lego, the Jetix of Lego, the Disney XD of Lego. Can you guess how old I am? Fox Kids must have given it away. God, that was years ago. They were pretty cool looking, but ultimately quite simple builds that had little action features like twistable gears that encouraged action play with the toys. Each different figure had a unique weapon, it had a removable mask, and its pieces were compatible with all of the other figures, so you could stick to the instructions or build them however you liked, and anything in between. What was particularly different about Bionicle for Lego was that it included its own story. Each character had their own place in the world they created, and this was teased out in television adverts, expanded on in character bios on the website, and later fully explored in full-length feature films. In a 2004 article by Rupert Widdicombe titled Building Blocks for the Future, in which he interviews Lego employees about Bionicle, he says this style of storytelling was met with resistance and skepticism by some Lego employees. At the time, every product decision was checked against the Lego values: high quality products, an emphasis on free play and encouraging imagination, and no modern warfare or violence. Bionicle was obviously high quality, but they were warriors, built for fighting with unique weapons and combat powers. Was that still Lego of them? And free play, encouraging imagination. These toys were being handed to you with existing identities and backstory. Was that still Lego of them? Well, Lego of them or not, the Bionicle series went absolutely crazy. Almost overnight, it became a cross-platform media franchise powerhouse that played a pretty huge role in pulling LEGO out of their financial troubles of the late 90s. To put this into context, in 1998, LEGO posted their first ever losses, right? And it was £23 million, which is a pretty hefty first loss, right? That's got to be quite a swing. But Bionicle, which was released in December 2000, so let's say 2001, made £100 million in its first year in sales. The Bionicle craze was actually so huge that if you go back and watch some episodes of Friends, you can see Bionicle in Joey and Chandler's apartment. It's incredible. You know, as a kid, I loved it, but then in retrospect, to look back on the kind of, you know, actual cultural impact it had, it's just really cool. As well as the Bionicle figures themselves, you had books, you had comic books, you had direct-to-DVD movies, episodic adventure games on the website. There were Bionicle watches, Bionicle lunchboxes, there were Bionicle card games, Bionicle board games. Mate, there were even Bionicle Nikes that you could clip a mask onto the toes of. Where were they when I was a kid? I mean, like, you know, I absolutely couldn't have afforded them, but like, I would have liked the option to resent the kids that could. Rupert's article also points out that before Bionicle there was a similar internal friction about ingrained storytelling for the 1999 Star Wars ranges. The sets were a success, and they, along with Winnie the Pooh actually, were the first movie TV franchise LEGO sets that the company had released. Which is crazy now when you think about it, because it's like there's a LEGO set for everything, right? Like, franchising has clearly been very profitable for them. The Star Wars sets came with an existing known story baked in. Everyone loved Star Wars. These sets launched alongside the prequel trilogy, and it was really very much about the Star Wars story. We can tell what side of that internal debate in the LEGO company won out, because 2 years later, here comes Mr. Bionicle with, you know, a established baked-in story and character identities being basically the backbone of the entire marketing campaign. It was all about story, and that story was very complex. The story of Bionicle is, you know, at a surface level, very simple and sellable. 6 multicolored elemental heroes need to save the world from a powerful evil. That alone could have sold some toys, right? But LEGO went much further than that. Bionicle is set in a science fantasy universe on an island called Matanui. The island is divided into 6 tribes based on the 6 elements: fire, water, air, earth, stone, and ice. These tribes are populated by Mataran, small and peaceful cyborgs who are, you know, lovers, not fighters. They're kind of defenseless. The 6 elemental warriors are known as the Toa, and it's their duty to protect the Mataran of Matanui from the evil Makuta by awakening the spirit of the island's creator, Great Spirit Matanui, who created the Mataran and then named the island, then they named the island Matanui after Great Spirit Matanui, who was their creator. So there's 2 Matanuis, the island and the spirit, one that made the Mataran. Anyway, I don't want to go any further than this until I've discussed the controversy around the aesthetic of Bionicle, because I think it's something that still needs to be talked about when we're referencing back to Bionicle today. I was too young to really sort of register or understand this. It went way over my head. I just thought the aesthetic was cool. But the aesthetic of the whole Bionicle world, the warriors, the island, the spirituality, the mythology, as well as the naming conventions, took kind of heavy-handed inspiration from Maori culture, the indigenous Polynesian people of mainland New Zealand, and apparently they also mixed in words from other Polynesian cultures too. I say heavy-handed because it doesn't do this with any kind of finesse. You know, the group is called the Toa. Well, Toa means warrior. The white Toa is the Toa of ice, and his name is Kopaka. Can you guess what that means? Ice. And the customizable masks that you can switch out from face to face are called Konohi, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong down in the comments. I've seen some sources say it means mask, some sources say it means face. But unfortunately, it wasn't all just simple clumsiness on LEGO's part. In 2001, New Zealand lawyer Maui Solomon represented 3 Maori tribes objecting to the use of Maori words. Solomon explained, "It was an unauthorized use of traditional names and language, and it was an inappropriate use. There had been no consultation, no prior informed consent, and it's a trivialization, especially when you're using names like Tohunga, Maori for priest, so there are cultural and moral issues." This word Tohunga is a Polynesian word for spirit healer. like a kind of spirit healer, and it had a kind of great cultural importance that LEGO were apparently very unaware of. Before they were called the Mataran, those little small kind of defenseless inhabitants of the island I mentioned, those were called Tahunga. And using that word in such a trivial context was considered to be quite offensive. After the Maori tribes won their legal battle, they changed the name of the population to the Mataran, although some words in the, let's call it the Bionicle lexicon, still remained. So I'm assuming that was probably part of some legal agreement between the parties, so LEGO didn't have to just clean out the whole franchise and start over. But LEGO committed to only use original words and not Polynesian ones for new names and titles, and also for new elements in the story, which, let's get back to. The story of Bionicle and the Isle of Matanui and the Toa is told through direct-to-DVD movies, comic books, and stuff like that. They have a really loyal fan base who would do a much better job of explaining the plots and stuff like that than I will. So in this video, I'm just going to focus on the toys, but a quick search on YouTube will bring up loads and loads of really excellent deep dives into, you know, the plots, the lore, the story, and stuff like that. But my focus here is the toys themselves and the effect they had on the media that was produced with them, and vice versa. Because what all of these direct-to-DVD movies and some of the books and comics have in common is pretty ingenious, and it's new looks. The first wave of the Toa looked like this, known as the Toa Mata, which I would consider to be their base forms. These were the launch toys that kicked off the whole franchise, and the ones I owned were this brown one, this white one, this green one, and this blue one. Now, by the time the first movie came out, which was called Bionicle Mask of Light, they already had new looks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the runway the Toa Nuva, with new accessories like shoulders and chest bit. Now, these were the ones that I owned, and visually you can already tell that they're sort of made to look like powered up, cooler versions of the ones that came before them. I mean, they've got new armor. Now, a year after that, the next movie comes out, and it's called Bionicle 2 Legends of Metra Nui. It's a prequel to the original movie, and guess what? There is a new team of Toa called the Toa Metru. They've got updated designs, again they look like awesome reiterated copies of the first Toa, and a year later the third movie comes out. It's called Bionicle 3 Web of Shadows, and guess what? The Toa Metru all get new looks. They get infected and become sort of edgy, evil-looking half-beast Toa called the Toa Hordika. You're seeing the pattern, right? These movies were released year on year, basically as a way to market the next wave of Bionicle toys. And this was always the intention from the very beginning. Not only has it been said by LEGO that they wanted a story franchise that could last maybe 20 years, spoiler alert, it didn't last 20 years, even the canisters that the very first Toa came in are a part of the story. The origin of the Toa is that these canisters fell into the sea and washed up onto Metra Nui. Sorry, washed up onto, what one was it? Matanui. So these canisters wash up on Matanui. So from the very moment that as a kid you get your first Bionicle and you're cracking open that canister, you're in the story. You're beginning your journey with the Bionicle, with the Toa. It's kind of ingenious. It's kind of like how, you know, in Toy Story, Buzz Lightyear comes in the spaceship, and that's like his spaceship from Star Commanders. It's exactly like that. Like, you know, you get the story from the packaging before you've even seen the toy itself. You're in the story. Call it speculation, right? I'm no market analyst, but it would appear that this densely packed world building, the spiritual aesthetic, and the themes of mystery and power all contributed to the freight train of success that Bionicle enjoyed. Sure, when you're 9, like, these fighting robots feel kind of cool and edgy and dangerous and dark, but what really sparks the imagination is the identities and the world that LEGO spun around these characters. But I have to confess something, right? I've never seen the movies, never read any of the books, never picked up any of the comics. I was completely Bionicle obsessed as a kid, right? Completely obsessed. I had at least a few Bionicle from every generation that I just mentioned, and I would play with them for hours. But that's the secret. I've never, until researching this video, really had any solid contextual exposure to the wider story of Bionicle. I've relied on the kind of, you know, the fantastic Bionicle YouTubers I mentioned that you should look up earlier to get, you know, to get your taste on the story. They're who I kind of relied on for that part of the research of this video. For me, you know, as a Bionicle kid, the most I kind of knew was like the, you know, let's call them the core tenets of the story. You know, 6 elemental heroes, individual weapons, masks give them powers, and they can also control the elements. I mean, that was enough. Like, that set my little brain working. I used to, as I said, play with them for hours. I would make my own stories. I would rip off the latest episode of Dragon Ball Z I just saw. And, you know, imagine that the Toa powering up to their silver armor forms happened as if they were going Super Saiyan. I would fuse them together into new warriors by combining their parts and pretending that, you know, this one now can control both of those elements. Combine them together. Ooh. And they'd have to, you know, unlock some kind of new power or weapon or something to defeat an enemy that was just too tough for them to even make a scratch on. I didn't know the canonical reasons for why all of these different Toa existed, and I didn't even really know their names. All I knew was that each generation of the Toa looked like a cooler, edgier, more powerful, upgraded version of those core character templates, right? 6 warriors who had powerful masks that gave them superpowers and could control the elements. I knew the story existed, but to me it was irrelevant. I never pictured my toys being on Matanui, I never pictured them protecting Matarans. I had my own stories to tell. And in that sense, I think that when LEGO were resistant to offering a pre-packaged story, they were kind of underestimating the limitless creativity of weird little kids. And they were underestimating the effects that limitations, I think, can have on creativity. Let's have a little mental exercise, right? Imagine a blank canvas. Draw something. Limitless possibility is kind of paralyzing, right? Now imagine another blank canvas. I give you a piece of charcoal and I say, draw your favorite dog while I draw my favorite dog. Doesn't that sound more fun? Isn't that in some ways just a lot more fun? Now, I hate to get Monica Geller here, but you know, we referenced Friends earlier, we might as well dive back in. Rules are good. Rules help control the fun. Well, even if you don't agree with me, LEGO seems to. In 2004, Anne Flemmert, who is senior researcher at the LEGO Learning Institute, said in an interview, "We haven't been good enough at keeping up with how children's ways of expressing their creativity have changed over time. Just like our society, children's play is much more complex than it has ever been, and toys are increasingly knowledge and rule-based. Like Pokemon, Beyblade, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Bionicle is one of the first examples of how this company is starting to loosen up a bit. I honestly believe that providing some framework, a basic story, building a world, it ignites the imagination, right? I mean, just look at the comeback of Dungeons and Dragons right now. There's a lot of rules in that game, there's a lot to control it, and yet it ignites the imagination in people. It gets people thinking, it gets people creating. Do whatever you want is too much for our minds. Maybe I'm like over modernizing the issue here, right? But like, we can't even choose what to watch on Netflix. Websites exist to tell us what to watch on Netflix. Now, I'm sure this wasn't everyone's experience, right? And I know a lot of people enjoyed getting very involved in the story of Bionicle and the films and the movies and the backstories, the comics. But for me, that was just all irrelevant. The bare bones of the story was a jumping off point for 10-year-old Jake to tell his own stories. There's a reason that fan fiction is often more popular than original written stories on the internet, right? It's because fans of the series have been given a jumping off point from the, oh my god, when I was 9 I was doing Bionicle fan fiction. I was doing Bionicle fan fiction, I just wasn't writing it down. That was such an indicator for where my life was headed. But this was still the time just before the internet became so universal, right? But the age of the internet doth the approach. The rise of the internet coincided with me kind of growing away from Bionicle, but by the time that all happened, Bionicle was already receding. So the big question, right? Where'd they go? What happened to them? Did Makuta succeed? No. Of course not, right? No one can beat the Toa. After a nearly 10-year run, LEGO announced in 2009 that Bionicle sets would be discontinued in 2010, which coincidentally was the year that I turned 18 and headed off to university. And if you'd have asked me at that age if I thought Bionicle was still up and running, do you know what I would have said? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'd just grown out of the kind of enjoyment that Bionicle had given me. I wasn't a collector, so buying new sets just didn't interest me and hadn't done for years. And I think this must happen for all toys, right? There's often a point in our lives in which we decide to stop playing with them, and unless we're particularly passionate about collecting, we stop buying them. Almost every kind of toy, with a few legendary exceptions, I'm looking at you Barbie, wink wink, have a natural life cycle. Eventually, fan drop-off must outweigh new interest until the retailers just aren't interested in buying it from Lego anymore. It won't move, it won't sell, it won't clear the shelves. According to a Bionicle Wikipedia article, bear in mind this is alleged, it's unsourced, the decision was made due to low sales and a lack of interest in the theme, going on to say that this could have possibly been brought on by its decade-long backstory and lore. As someone who never really engaged with the lore in the first place, and still to this day, even after the research of this video, doesn't get a lot of the story beats and the plot elements, that sounds very believable, doesn't it? In the later stages of Bionicle's lifetime, there were a huge variety of sets that didn't seem incredibly glued to a cohesive theme unless you were really into the story. They just started to resemble random disconnected playsets. And that had to be a barrier of entry for people who were thinking of buying Bionicle. Just think about what else was going on by 2010 as well. By that point, broadband internet was a normality in most homes. We were like in the late stage of the 7th generation of home consoles like the Wii, the PS3, the Xbox 360, you had the Nintendo DS. Hell, in 2010, that was when the 3DS was announced. It was a completely different world to the one that Bionicle had launched in the year 2000. But do you want me to tell you what I think really put the nail in the coffin of Bionicle? Are you sure? Are you really sure? Okay, it's this. The brick. That's right, the brick. 10-year-old Jake only owned Bionicle, right? And throughout my entire childhood, I never owned a brick-based Lego product. You know, I mean, maybe that's hyperbole. Maybe I had some little set from the paper or something like that came free with The Sun. I mean, my parents used to read The Sun, it was a different time. They didn't know, I forgive them. But my point is, the only brick-based Lego sets I've ever really owned are the ones that I've bought myself as an adult. A renewed interest in Lego, for me, has come from the fact that there's now so much new Lego media, right? And I think that's intentional. A 2009 article in the Telegraph written by Craig McLean called Lego, Play It Again, summarises the ways in which Lego was preparing for a bright new brick-based future. In 2004, they appointed Jørgen Vig Knudstorp as CEO of the company, making him the first CEO who wasn't a member of the family who originally founded Lego. And he created a 3-stage action plan: stability, restructuring, and restoring growth. The 4 Legoland parks were sold off to a professional theme park operator. 80% of Lego's production had been outsourced. Now, Lego took back control of those factories. Products were discontinued, Duplo was reintroduced. They focused on their key lines: Lego City, Lego Technic, Lego Creator, and basic Lego sets. The company went back to the core, the brick. The world of Lego had been a lot smaller in the year 2000, and the company had only just taken its first steps in loosening the idea of what Lego could be, what it could become. By the late noughties, Lego was preparing for a future based around their core strengths. Just listen to this quote from Cephas Howard, a senior concept designer at Lego, in the same article. "We design toys, we don't run theme parks, it's not our skill base. The parks are important for the brand. Selling them wasn't about them not existing anymore. It was about saying, are we the right people to run them? That brought it back over to saying, okay, we're going back to the core. But what is the core? The core is the Lego brick. Now this is speculation on my part, okay? I haven't read this anywhere, but I think that that focus on the brick was a sign of what was to come in the company's future. I'm sure that they were planning it for a very long time, and that is the revival of the joy of building. I think Lego wanted to future-proof their business by making the Lego brick the star of the show again. And outside of this, one interview from 2009, there are a couple of other things that followed it that I think support my theory. By 2010, Lego had already released 3 Lego Star Wars games. Well, it's only 2 if you take into account that the third was a compilation, but it had a couple more features and stuff. Sure, these games rode off the back of Star Wars, but built into the gameplay was breaking things down, rebuilding, collecting, customizing your own little Lego Star Wars character from the parts that you'd collected by playing the game. All 3 of these games were massive financial and critical successes that used an existing strength, right, the Star Wars licensing, to refocus on the joy of Lego, the joy of building. And you know what else was already being thought about by the year 2010 when Bionicle was cancelled?
Everything is awesome!
That's right, the Lego movie. Although, you know, the time between the start of this pre-production process and the eventual casting of Chris Pratt in 2012 tells me that it was probably in incredibly early stages when Bionicle was cancelled, maybe even a very different film to the one we have now, but it was in their minds. But I think we can all agree that the Lego movie is not only fantastic, but it's a love story to Lego, to building, to breaking free of the instructions, enjoying boundless creativity. The bad guy's a dad that insists on sticking to the rules, sticking to the instructions. Like, how much more blatant could they be? And sure, you know, like I said, this may be a very different film to the one they were planning at the time of Bionicle's cancellation. But if we assume, I think pretty safely, that even at that early stage, the film's intent was to be about the joy of building, to be a love story to Lego, then I think that makes another pretty powerful argument that by the time of Bionicle's cancellation, their heart wasn't in it. They were looking to the future with brick-shaped hearts in their eyes. But hadn't they just struck gold with that multi-platform media game experience? It worked so well, it had done wonders for Bionicle. Why would they just throw all that out? Chuck all that gold away? I hear you ask. And the answer is that they didn't. Lego Ninjago is a line of action-adventure combat-themed sets that have been released every year since 2011, and there are planned sets through into 2021. The accompanying TV show is in its 13th season with no sign of stopping, and every series of the Lego Ninjago TV show corresponds to a new wave of releases in the Lego sets. The Lego Ninjago movie got a theatrical release and grossed $123 million against a $70 million budget. Like, you know, it's not going to win any Oscars, and nor was it the most profitable film of the year, but you can't sniff at those numbers. In short, Bionicle walked so that other Lego franchises could run. Lego took the lessons that it had learned from the surprising monumental success of Bionicle's cross-platform media model and started to crank out other Lego themes with varying levels of success, like Lego Chima and Nexo Knights. But you know what those sets all have in common? They're brick-based. It's the brick. If you've got this far into this video, then you're probably at least as big a Bionicle fan as me. So let me ask you a question. Did you know that Bionicle got rebooted in 2015 with a fresh release of Toa and a newly rebooted story and world that was much more easier to understand? Did you know that there was a Netflix TV show and a fourth movie to accompany this new release of Bionicle? No, me either. I literally had no idea, and by that point I was, you know, an adult with disposable income and fond memories. I would have happily gone and bought some Bionicle. The idea of just buying new Bionicle for nostalgia's sake would have gripped me. I mean, I know I wasn't the target audience at that point, right? But what I'm saying is, if I'd have caught any of the marketing, I'd have been in there like swimwear. Shortly after the original cancellation of Bionicle, there was also a Lego theme called Hero Factory, but apparently everybody hates that. It didn't do well, the TV show for it didn't even finish, I mean, geez. And what do all these things have in common? They're not brick-based. They don't fit into Lego's brick-based view of the future that began with the plans Jürgen Vig Knudstorp, I'm so sorry, set out in 2004 to take the company back to its core. The marriage of the joy of unlimited creativity and going back to the brick. So, the answer to the question, 4,000 words later, where did all the Bionicles go? And the short answer? Their work was done. There wasn't a sustainable amount of interest in the product to keep a fan base alive. And in my opinion, it didn't fit with Lego's brick-based vision of the future. A vision that I think has been a big part of the reason that Lego is the unstoppable brand that it is today. Sometimes when we grow away from the things we love, we don't take notice that it's happened until they're taken away from us. It felt to me like Bionicle vanished overnight because the next time I thought about it, it was nowhere to be seen. Bionicle shook up the vision of the future for Lego. It clearly gave them a fresh charge of inspiration for what the life cycle of future properties would look like when they combined their past successes with their vision for the future, one that was built around the iconic brick. In the first half of 2015, Lego surpassed Mattel, the creator of Barbie, as the world's largest toy company by revenue. In 2017, they were named the world's most powerful brand, overtaking Ferrari for the top spot. Bionicle didn't vanish, we just moved on. Lego moved on. And their new vision is working. It's working brilliantly. But I still get, you know, kind of a warm feeling when I think about how, in my opinion, they wouldn't be where they are today without 10-year-old Jake's favourite toy. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. This was definitely my biggest project yet. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe. There are plenty more of this kind of video on the way, and it would really help me out if you could, you know, let me know what you thought in the comments, and also share this video with anyone you think might like it. Anyone that likes this kind of deep dive, right? Or even just, like I said, someone that used to play with Bionicle. Curiosity led me down this hole, and it's been a really, really satisfying video to make. Hope you enjoyed it. Jake signing off. Okay, bye.